gonna talk about glazing and do a glaze demo. So first thing you're gonna need when you glaze is to have filled out the form so that you came to the school and picked up the correct glaze that you wanted. You also might need glaze cups or glaze brushes. So when it comes to the brushes, you wanna tell me which size you want. If you're trying to do small little details, then you're gonna want a small brush, okay? Or if you're trying to paint like a rather large bowl, you might want a big brush, okay? This is kind of the medium-sized brush, kind of like what you have already in your toolkit. And then also, just a quick mention, this is a fan brush. This is kind of the ideal brush if you're trying to paint like a big bowl. This is a really smooth way to get glaze on, but it may not be ideal if you're, glazing your pinch pot creature and you're trying to get different stripes and colors. In that case, you're gonna wanna use more of a paintbrush that's smaller and more round and easier to work with. So that's brushes. I also like to use my sponge so I can wipe off glaze. You'll see it's kind of stained for some of the red glazes that had iron oxide in them. You'll need your piece of pottery that has been fired already once. It is now bisqueware. So the red clay looks like this when it's fired, okay? This is what the white clay looks like when it's fired. The gray clay turns white. So when you get your glaze cups, okay, and your brush, you wanna make sure to clean them so they are perfectly clean on the inside and that we don't have any cross-contamination from other glazes. You will probably get a brush that looks like this and a cup that looks like this. Why? Because the drawer in the classroom that they're all coming from, most of them look like this, and Mrs. Green doesn't have time to clean all of them, and we didn't have a cleaning day at the end of the school year last year, obviously, because we weren't here at school. So things might be a little messy. Make sure that you wash them. You'll also want to make sure that if your brush is caked on like this, that you don't flick it. Because remember, glaze has silica in it. Silica causes silicosis. You don't want to breathe in clay dust. You don't want to breathe in glaze dust. Okay, so that's my prep. I don't have my canvas down. Notice, because I don't want to get glaze on my canvas, and then when I'm wedging my clay later, I end up picking up red and green and all these colors, and also when I fire my project, there's all these little spots of color that I didn't plan on. So we don't want to glaze on our canvas. You can just glaze on a table, it will come right off, okay? Alrighty, so let's get started. Let's talk about some of the different glazes that we have. You're gonna want to refer to the glaze chart and notes that are in Google Classroom, but we're gonna go ahead and start glazing now. So before I ever start glazing, the first thing I wanna do is rinse off my bisqueware, okay? Your pottery has been sitting around this room, okay? It's all full of dust. In the firing, something could have exploded and dust could be on the project. So I always rinse off my projects in the sink, okay, for a good second or two. Kind of rub them, get off any dust, especially if they've been sitting around for a long time. Okay, then you do want to let them dry before you glaze them. It should take just a couple minutes or so. So while these are drying, I'm going to go ahead and get my glaze. I'm going to show you how to glaze on white clay with a stroke and coat glaze. Okay, so again, for this, I just poured out just a little bit. I don't need a lot, okay, into this cup. I can always pour more, but I don't want to sit here and have to scoop this all back in this bottle. That's a waste of my time. So I'm just going to pour out a little bit. And then I'm going to select this brush, okay? And I'm going to start glazing this. So I'm just going to start on the bottom here, okay? And I'm just going to begin painting this on, okay? I want to make sure that I'm not getting it on the bottom, because remember, if glaze is like glass. So if the bottom is glazed, then when I fire this, it's gonna stick to the kiln shelf. Now, let's say I get a little bit of glaze on this foot, okay? Can you see there's a little glaze right there, okay, on the edge? No big deal. When I'm done glazing this, all I'm gonna do is wipe this off. But you know what? I'm probably gonna get glaze on it again, so I'm not gonna wipe it right now. I'm just gonna wait till the end, okay? But don't forget, you can glaze anything that doesn't touch the bottom, okay? So if we look at this foot, okay, this raised part right here is what touches the table or the kiln shelf. This part right here is lower. So if I wanted to, I could glaze that, okay? If you have a project like that. Ooh, Oops, I just flowed glaze everywhere. Okay, sometimes the glaze can be really thick. Sometimes it can be kind of watery. Okay, it depends on who used it last and if they added water or if they left the lid off, okay, which can happen a lot in a high school. So if your glaze is really thick, okay, then you do want to add a little bit of water, and I like to just use a clean fork and stir it up, okay? If it is too watery, then you could leave the lid off of it for an hour or two maybe, and it would evaporate some of the water out, okay? But it should be just kind of like a nice paint thickness, okay? I should be able to dip it and it shouldn't be dripping immediately off the brush, but if I hold it long enough, it should start to drip, okay? If it's really, really chunky, you know, you need to stir it longer. Okay, so when we're glazing, you're gonna glaze this entire thing 3 times, okay? 3 times. Now let's say that I don't wanna glaze this whole thing the same color. That's totally fine. Okay, let's say I wanted to have a stripe. Well, I would paint this bottom part 3 times, okay, with the same color I'm using. And then I would get a different brush, a different cup, and a different glaze, and I would paint this section that had remained white the other color, okay? Now, say you wanna layer some glazes, like maybe I wanna put a light blue over this red to get kind of a purple effect, okay? I could do that if it's a glaze that you know is safe to mix, okay? Like they're the same line. So if I wanted to, okay, I could glaze this whole thing 3 times. Make sure you let it dry between coats. It will dry pretty quick, okay? On this side, it's already starting to dry. Can you see the difference between the wet and the dry glaze, okay? And each coat takes a little longer to dry. So this first coat's gonna dry pretty quick, okay? Probably in a couple minutes. And then the next coat might take a little longer before you apply the third, okay? Don't touch it when it's wet because then you'll make fingerprints that show up in the project, alrighty? And that's not cool. All right, so say I wanted to glaze another color on top, okay? Well, I know that Mayco glazes, stroke and coats, do mix. They're the same line and same company. So I could paint like another layer of another color that I know would look nice on top of that, or I could do polka dots, things like that. What I never, ever, ever wanna do, okay, is like, let's say I wanted this maroon color I'm using to be lighter. It's not like paint. I can't just grab white glaze and pour it in here and stir it up. That does not work. Don't ever do that, okay? If you're gonna layer glazes, you do it on the pot, okay? You do one color, you paint it completely, those 3 layers or 2 layers if you're trying to get to layer colors. Let it dry, then with a new brush and a new color, I would then paint a layer of the other color, okay? And again, this only works with certain lines of glazes that we know interact well, okay? I would not suggest mixing a Mayco glaze with an Amico glaze. No one, I mean, people might have tested it, but these companies aren't talking or like, hey, let's coordinate and make sure all of our glazes mix. It doesn't happen, okay? Sometimes they can bubble, they can turn gross, you just don't know what's gonna happen. So if you have a question about it, just email me and I will tell you if that color combination is a good idea or not, okay? So hopefully you're getting the idea here. So now I've basically put on 2 layers of this color, okay? You've gotta keep track of which coat you're on, okay? If you ever stop glazing, just write on a sticky note what layer you're on and come back. Another thing you can do is glaze a certain direction. So I glazed this first whole coat kind of in a horizontal direction. If I wanted to, so I could see which layers, like, especially when you're using white, it's hard to tell white glaze on white clay. So for this next layer, I might brush up and down, okay? So then I can see where I've been and where I haven't, okay? So I would wanna get 3 layers on that, okay? When it's dry, I will take my sponge, okay? And I will just simply, okay, wipe off the glaze that's on the spot it's not supposed to be, okay? And I promise you, even if you are the world's best glazer, you're gonna get glaze on the bottom of your pot sometimes. It's not a big deal at all. Just please check it, okay, that you've wiped it off before you bring it to the school, I don't have 8 hours of my day to wipe everyone's projects off, okay? I just won't, and then I probably won't fire it. So you gotta do that. All right, so 3 layers. Now, this is gonna be a little jar, so would I wanna glaze the inside of this too? Yes, because it's a jar, it has a function. If I was not going to use the inside of this, okay, no one's ever gonna see it, then I'm probably not gonna waste the glaze and glaze the inside of that, okay? It just depends on your project. So for this one, while that one's drying, I still need one more coat on it, but it's just a demo. I'm just trying to give you the idea here. So for this glaze, it's never been used. So I'm gonna take this off, okay? You don't wanna shake them and get a bunch of bubbles, but you do kinda wanna gently mix them, okay? But don't be like super crazy, all right? Just wanna make sure you got enough, especially on these crystalline ones, guys. All of the little pieces of crystal, of glass that you want are down at the bottom. So you're gonna wanna kinda get your brush and kinda scoop down in there to get those little pieces, because that's the good stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna open this glaze up for the first time. It's very exciting. Okay. Maybe. Let me grab a tool here. I've got an X-Acto knife. Okay, so this glaze has a tendency to form something what's called an oolite. It's quite a weird word. Basically, it's some of the minerals that are in the glaze that kind of stuck together because they've been there for a while, okay? And so in that case, what you wanna do is peel them off of your project. So even though this glaze is brand new, this glaze has a tendency to have oolites. So I guarantee we're gonna find one in here. So I'm just giving it a good little stir. All right, and this is a glaze that I know looks good on red clay. So I'm gonna use that. And again, I'm using a fan brush because I'm glazing a very large project. Okay, so I wanna get nice coats on here. And I'm trying to pick out one of these oolites. And so I'm being pretty generous with the glaze here. That is totally fine. If you can recall in class, I told you that most glazes are gonna be semi-transparent, okay? And that by getting 3 even layers, it'll create an opaque glaze. So can you see right there how that pink is kind of shining through of the clay body? So if I only had 1 layer, it probably wouldn't look very good and it'll look kind of streaky, but you'll definitely be able to see the red clay underneath. Okay, sometimes we want that, sometimes we don't. It just depends on what you're shooting for. Okay, so I want you to see there's some little chunks, okay, that have shown up. So I'm gonna take those off. Just taking my thumb and just kind of wiping them off. Those could be little baby oolites that are forming, okay? And then when this is fired, you'll have bumps on your project that you maybe didn't want. So always look for little chunks and kind of pick them off of your project. So that layer is almost dry. So I'm gonna go ahead and paint another layer. Again, if you want to, so I can keep track, I'm gonna go up and down this time so I can see where I've been. Again, be kind of generous with your glaze. I have a texture on this project, so I'm gonna make sure I really fill, okay, and kind of push it into any of those cracks and crevices. Anything that's still, you know, red or white, depending on your clay body, when you glaze it, is gonna stay that way. It's gonna be rough and really it's gonna stick out on your project because everything else is gonna be a nice, beautiful color. Okay, and boom, I found an oolite. I told you I would. Okay, I like this glaze a lot, but you just have to know what you're working with. Okay, so right there, hopefully you can see this little dot right there. Okay, that's an oolite. So I'm gonna just pop that out of there, wipe it off. I am gonna go over it again with my brush to get rid of my fingerprint. Okay, and I'm gonna finish this second layer of glaze. Okay, big, nice strokes. I'm gonna set this down because the second coat usually takes longer to dry than the first. I will come back and glaze this a third time. I will then wipe off the glaze off of the bottom, okay? And then when I'm done using this brush, I wanna make sure I get all the glaze back into that container, okay? You are gonna be returning these glazes to the school. So see how I got some glaze on the side of my bottle there? I'm gonna wipe that and be a decent person, make sure this lid gets on there sealed tight. You don't want this spilling in your mom's car during transport, okay? Glazes are expensive. It's a privilege to get to use them. Take care of them well, okay? All right, well, that is Glazing 101.